Hi, everybody. So I'm tasked to give a recap of the discussions yesterday around the patient-focused drug development. First, I want to thank David Digby for putting together a really nice slide where I think it really captures all of the questions that was being addressed under that session. On the far right, you can see some of the key messages, I think, that stemmed from this conversation. That being that we really need community collaboration for us to achieve these important, and I would say crucial interactions that need to happen with the FDA, stemming from direct input of individuals with lived experience. And this, I really believe, is a must-have and not just a nice-to-have. I think Jonathan Stokes opened up that series of discussions, really stressing that other indications are doing this. This is something that's absolutely needed to have these interactions with the FDA. And the FDA, they're doing quite a bit, and they're not the ones who are going to give us any guidance. They're waiting for us to give the guidance to them, and we need to make sure that the guidance is coming from the right stakeholders, and those stakeholders need to be people with lived experience. This, the patient-focused drug discovery is also, it sets a North Star. We have an end goal to go after this crucial PFDD meeting that needs to be put into place. So we can build a roadmap to get to that end goal, to achieve that meeting. It's possible that by next year, we're finalizing that meeting and getting everything into place. That's a clear goal that we all have to start these important interactions with regulatory agencies. This is an incredible opportunity also to catalyze the entire community, to make sure that everybody will have a voice and get everyone's input. It raises awareness, and I think this is going to drive investment. We need to be lowering the risk of doing research in SCI. We need to ensure that the clinical trials that are being conducted are going to be very informative and have value to individuals with lived experience. Dr. Kirschblum gave a great talk and gave examples of what happens when that input is not happening at early stages and when that input is not driving the clinical trial, and we can end up in a situation where it's difficult to interpret the data and maybe the data isn't as impactful as we thought before. The conversations that were happening with Barry Monroe and Linda Jones, I think, really stress some important questions that need to be addressed for us to get to this PFDD meeting. There were 4 questions that were posed. The first one being, how can we increase the impact of outcomes for individuals living with the SCI? The second was addressing heterogeneity to ensure that we're having a very effective meetings and that they're not incredibly broad, and we're zeroing in on understanding the different cohorts of individuals that are affected and what are the outcomes that are really important. And then the other 2 questions are getting more at the logistics of how is this actually going to be carried out to make sure that we have in the future the proper recruitment and retention for clinical trials. How are we going to achieve the logistics also and the financials that are all going to be involved in being able to establish a PFDD meeting. So I think this is all very much captured here on the slide. You can see around the circular area all the stakeholders that are there, people with lived experience, advocacy groups, healthcare professionals, research, industry, others, and I think others there's a lot of importance of having advocacy patient organizations that are acting as neutral conveners to be able to talk to the FDA. And I think this was already coming from conversations that we had last year at this meeting. Maybe it was a little implicit, but it was there. And it can't just be one stakeholder going to the FDA and making a pitch of what's going to be the right outcome measure. The reason being, the FDA can interpret that as being maybe slightly biased, maybe it's only applying to that stakeholder. What they need to hear is really from the entire community, from neutral conveners, from individuals living with SCI injury. So I think those talks from Jonathan, from Linda, from Barry, from Stephen really drive home the why, what, can, how, and the value. And the value is that we get an audience with the FDA And then we'll have a partnership with the FDA and making sure that the input is the correct input that really has value for individuals living with SCI. So that is my best attempt at recapping, I think, a pretty complex session that we had, but one that is incredibly crucial. And it begs the question, what is next? And I'll pass that on to Brian.
Thanks, Marco. I'm going to call you good cop, which will make me bad cop. So yesterday, I asked you to, even though it's summer and school's out, I asked you to do some homework. I asked you to think about how develop an opinion on PFDD. Think about whether you could be involved, how you can contribute. There's thinking that has to happen. There's doing that has to happen. There's paying that has to happen. There's a lot of things that'll go into this. And as I described it as open source, it's a very much a group and sort of flat kind of process that we need to employ to make sure that it is successful. So we're looking for input from folks who, from you folks specifically, to help us make sure that we remain on track and that we're doing the right sorts of things. So I did my homework last night. I was sitting at the bar with some folks from Intelligix and NerveGen, and we were talking about like impediments to investing in spinal cord programs, and it was quickly apparent to us that PFDD can be one of many things that can help with that, right? Because having clarity around things like endpoints and understanding that certain measurements and assessments and tools are embraced by the FDA, endorsed by the FDA, acceptable to FDA, is a really important consideration and component. So I'm sure you also did your homework. And so what I'm going to do is ask you to, I'm going to go ahead a slide here. Do I know how to do this? I do. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pull out your phone. I know you're supposed to not be looking at your phone during conferences, so I'm going to go counterculture here. I'm going to ask you to pull out your phone and take a picture of the QR code. It's black and white, high contrast. I think you're going to get it. And then just like keep that slide open for later, right? Don't work on it now. But it's going to lead you to these questions and a place to populate some answers and responses. If we get 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5 people to write some ideas in here, it gives us some substrate, it gives us some working matter that we can go and kind of think about. And so this is one of the working group's efforts to broaden the community of input and to get some good ideas and try, as I said at the very beginning, to have this conference be more than just a meeting of the minds and sharing ideas, but actually morph into an event that can drive action and activity and results. So that's that. But don't work on that now because all the good stuff's coming up. But thank you very much for your interest in PFDD, and please rest assured that we will continue working on this in earnest.